Hey, welcome back to Love Isn't Enough. You're here with Joree and John, and he's in an irreverent, slightly annoying mood, but this should be a fun conversation. Hi.
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 Slightly annoying to who or
Well,
to
I'm the
whom?
one who can see you.
It's not annoying to me. It's amusing to me.
It's always a great question is if it's amusing to you, but annoys the people around you, how do you balance out what to do?
What balance?
Anyhow,
Is that a
are you
rhetorical
ready to, are you
question?
ready to focus?
I'm okay.
Be
I'm
present,
focusing. I'm
focus.
focusing.
We're here
Okay.
for our listener to guide and
Okay.
teach them on
Okay.
relationship skills that's supposed to help them, not teach them how to be annoyed with their partner.
Okay. So are you the intrepid, courageous listener? Are you ready for the hook?
Give them the hook,
Here comes
John.
the hook.
That sounds like too much of a hook when you tell them it's a hook.
It's a preparatory hook. So, anyway, here's the hook. The hook is if you knew of some things that you may or may not be doing in your relationship or in your marriage that we could use to predict divorce with over 90% accuracy, would you be interested in hearing what those are?
Yes, 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 says the listener.
Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing because in the social sciences, there's nothing. And I think the actual stat is 92% accuracy. Within 5 minutes of watching a video of you arguing about something, John Gottman can predict with 92% accuracy whether you will be divorced in 5 years. And nothing in the social sciences approaches that kind of accuracy. Very little.
It's pretty amazing. And I just have to say, shout out to the Gottmans. I mean, I remember being in graduate school and even actually undergrad and learning about the Gottman's work and being so absolutely. Oh, you might need those to read. See, I just grabbed his glasses out of his hand so he doesn't play with them and make sounds, but he might actually need them to read his notes. Sorry.
Annoying is in the eyes of the beholder.
The back end work going on around here. As I was saying, the Gottmans, I mean, they've been scientifically studying relationships, which
for
almost
50 years.
For 50 years, which almost seems like an oxymoron. Like, how do you scientifically study what may not feel measurable, such as relationship patterns?
Yeah. And they've gone about it in a very unique way. They had a house that they used to host couples in, and they would hook them up and look at physiological responses in terms of blood pressure and skin conductance and heart rate and cortisol, and then they would go back and deconstruct at what was going on moment by moment along with video.
I had told myself, had I not been in the relationship I was when I was in college and was looking into graduate school, I would have loved to go to Seattle and work at the Love Lab is what it was called. It was like the original, like the OG reality show, really. Yeah. And they would record couples 24 hours a day for a couple of days at a time. And this is what they were able to track as one of their best ongoing, consistent stats and predictors of what, not just the predictor of divorce, but I want to look at it from the other lens of let's not do these things and be a predictor of happiness and connection.
Well, I think that's one of the brilliant things about them. And to me, John and Julie Gottman are the preeminent researchers on relationships in the world, period, bar none. And I think one of the things that's beautiful about them is I would say they spent, I don't know, 30 years looking at what makes us break up and divorce. And then they spent the last 10, 15, 20 years looking at what makes a healthy relationship. And I think we need both sides of the coin because both are critically important. But to move on to the topic of the day, we're going to do a two-part series on the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, as the Gottmans have named them. And these four are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
And these are the four things that they have determined, as you said, in their research, that when these four things are present, it is a predictor of divorce with that high level of accuracy. Yeah. So the invitation here, as you're listening, is, as always, because some of the times the things that we talk about might induce some shame or self-judgment, or your inner critic might get louder, be like, shit.
Yeah, for God's sake, don't get defensive.
About us talking about defensiveness. But this is part of the work, is how can we engage in new patterns while managing our physiology?
Yeah.
right? Because what I was starting to kind of allude to is even talking about this stuff is going to increase some sort of physiological response if you notice these are patterns you and your partner engage in.
Yeah.
And that physiological response might look like a pit in your stomach, heart rate increase, tension or tightness in your shoulders, constriction of your throat, tightness in the chest. These are indicators of a stress response.
And we're also not very good at spotting them.
Right.
I mean, for many of us, there's this huge disconnect between what we believe is going on in our mind and what's going on in our body. And in fact, the Gottmans use a pulse oximeter. And in fact, a lot of Gottman therapy will have a pulse oximeter on the fingertips of both partners so that they can measure what the pulse is doing. And if the pulse goes over 100 beats per minute, they'll stop what's going on and say, we got to take a 20-minute timeout. Each of you go to your corner and read a magazine and don't think about what we were just talking about.
Well, and I'd quite to stay on this topic for a second, because we've talked about this before, and I don't recall if it was specifically. Oh no, we did. Our last episode was about sex, because I also know we talk about this on our masterclass series. But this idea of just how disconnected we are from our own physiology. When we talk about it in regards to sex, there's this very easy familiar pattern, well, not easy, but familiar pattern women get into in regards of being disconnected from their body and their arousal state. And I think we are easily disconnected from our body in our emotional state, that tightness, that tension. We're not translating that into saying, I need a pause.
And it's not
just I need
women.
A break. Right. Well, that's what
I would
saying.
say it's men also, because we learn at a young age how to suppress pain, but also how to suppress emotion.
Right. I was drawing the comparison
ourselves from the body.
Women and sex was the bridge, but we all cut off from that. And one of the best ways to learn these tools we're about to teach is to notice the barriers to being able to access them.
Yeah.
And those barriers are going to show up in our physiology. And it's easy to start there first, because you can name that with observation. Oh, I'm noticing my heart increasing. I'm noticing my shoulders just got a little bit tense. I am noticing a pit in my stomach. And the idea here is to slow down our reactivity to that and either assume, oh shit, what's the problem here? But really just to notice that as an indicator of something in me is activated. What can I do to deactivate it? Because if I'm activated, I'm not able to access my tools and resources.
And I think this also speaks to the importance of practicing tools like deep breathing, mindfulness, meditation, when things are good, when things are calm, so that we can have a better chance of returning to that relaxed state when things are tense.
Right. We got to build the pathway outside of the emergency. And if you and your partner are having an argument, I'm going to say that in your body, that feels like an emergency.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of fight, flight, freeze when you're getting triggered and you're arguing. And the further you argue, the more disconnected from your own body and likely from what you're saying and from your partner you're going to end up being.
Yeah. So let's go over the 4 real quickly, just briefly, and then we'll focus on 2 in this episode.
Sounds great.
Do you want to start with criticism?
Sure. There's so much to say about criticism. When couples begin to name their partner's behaviors or ways of engaging or communicating through a lens of criticism, it is never, ever going to lead to connection.
Yeah. And criticism looks like attacking the whole person versus speaking to their behavior, which might be annoying in the minute. In other words, your partner doesn't do the dirty dishes like he said he was going to. And she comes home, she's like, oh my God, you are so lazy. You never do the dishes. That sentence of "you are so lazy" is a criticism. It's describing him as a complete whole.
It's a character
Maybe
attack.
An asshole. I don't know. But it's a whole.
It's a character
A whole
attack.
with a W, not without.
We got it, John.
Okay.
Context clues.
Yeah.
It's a character attack.
Yeah.
It's not, the opposite of criticism would be to name exactly what you see. Oh, I see the dishes weren't done. I'm disappointed that wasn't followed through on. I mean, I actually said that a lot more, but with a lot more awareness, because there was no you statement in there. Because the you is one of the things that causes defensiveness, which we'll get to as well. But to be mindful of in criticism, what are you overarching into character? versus specific behaviors or things that are in the
Yeah,
moment.
it's an attack on character. And so the next one is contempt. And we're not doing these in any particular order other than alphabetical. So contempt, I think of contempt
Contempt
as,
would have come first.
oh, you're right. Then forget the alphabetical order. We're not doing this. We're just doing this willy-nilly. So contempt, I think of as anger with judgment. And it often looks like sarcasm, eye rolling, disdain. It in a relationship, it's where one partner is putting themselves on some level above the other partner as if they know better or as if they are better. And this is the most dangerous of the four.
I think they're all pretty dangerous in their own right. I mean, they all, I mean, this one is bad, but they all are really painful, and they all have a lot of potential to create a lot of damage and harm in the relationship.
Well, this is the one that Gottman focuses on when he's looking at videos of couples. And if he sees it within 5 minutes or less in a video of the couple arguing, he knows with 92% accuracy, they're headed for divorce.
Yeah.
That's insane. It's thin slicing.
It is.
At its finest.
And, I think of contempt as a place of righteousness. Like, and you said that I'm better than you, and I know better, I am better, I do better. And that is really damaging to safety.
Yeah. The third one, if we're not going alphabetically, is, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, you described it. It was my turn.
Go ahead. I was just going to say it, and then you can explain it.
Defensiveness.
Yes.
That's what I want to talk
about. Okay, you say it and explain it.
Defensiveness is not being able to listen openly to what your partner has to say. And so therefore the opposite of defensiveness would be open-hearted, open-minded, open listening.
Yeah. And I think I used to think of defensiveness as, my partner comes at me with a criticism or perceived criticism, and I respond with some degree of anger, defending what I was thinking or doing or my intention. And one of the things I realized in this relationship with you is defensiveness doesn't have to have any anger at all to it. I can still be defensive if I just calmly respond and explain, this is what I was thinking, this is what I was trying to do, these were my intentions. Because even when I do that, I'm not focused on hearing and validating her emotion.
Right.
And that's the problem.
And we're going to go into deeper all this and give actually a lot more examples and explain how to get out of the patterns and what to do there. And I think this is one of the most this is just on my observational analysis of my own client base and witnessing couples in session. I think defensiveness is one of the most common and repeated over and over, because it seems like if contempt is one of the biggest, I feel like defensiveness is one of the smallest, and it happens so easily.
Well, I think it's innate too. Like, we're born with it at some level. Right. And it's a natural instinct to want to share what were you thinking or doing, because a lot of times our intentions are good, but they can still hurt our partner.
Right. And so if contempt is looking, from a place of higher and attacking, or even criticism or attacking character, if I'm defending my character.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last one.
And the last one is a Hall of Fame one for me personally. It's stonewalling.
Not in a good Hall of Fame way.
No.
It was not a good award.
The worst Hall of Fame. The negative Hall of Fame. But basically what it is it's shutting down and removing yourself from the conversation, whether verbally, physically, or emotionally. And I used to have a great rationalization for it. I used to think, well, I'm getting flooded, I'm getting angry, I'm getting triggered. I don't want to say anything in anger that's going to hurt Joree, which is completely defensible and a great rationalization in my mind. The problem is it's still, in the moment, is stonewalling.
Right.
And I knew stonewalling was really problematic. And as soon as I had that realization, like, oh crap, I'm stonewalling, that was my motivation to start to change it. But
what's interesting is I was in a tough spot there, because even if I were to name as gently as I could, hey, love, this is stonewalling here. And I don't think I ever said it to you that clearly, but it could have been easy for you to respond as having it as a criticism.
Yeah.
Potentially even seeing it as contempt of, I'm not stonewalling. I don't do that to you. That's a contemptuous response right there. And to get, I'm better than that.
I think it's a defensive response. I don't know if it's
contemptuous. I could see how
if I'm thinking I'm better than you.
Well, that's what I started to say, that I'm better than you because I don't do that to you. right? That would be some contempt thrown that
Yeah.
direction. And yeah, it's a really painful one to be on the receiving end of.
Yeah. And
None of these feel good, but
it's unilaterally shutting down communication, connection, and the conversation.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit more. We're going to do two of these.
Criticism and defensiveness.
Great. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's start with criticism.
Alphabetical.
Let's back to the alphabetical. We'll get it right. Yeah, damn it. Let's start with the dishwasher.
We have a couple examples.
Because that's a classic.
This is a
for
classic.
most couples. And a lot of times the stuff we argue about is stupid stuff. But it's stuff that we just get in the Groundhog Day of repeating these same arguments over and over and over. And, you know, when Joree and I are working with a couple, we don't focus on the details. We don't care a whole lot about the details. We care about the underlying patterns so we can stop the pattern of repetitive arguments.
Right. And sometimes we need to see those details in action a couple of times to see the full patterns. But this is an invitation to the listener. If you are over focusing on the details of he said, she said, you're missing the point of how you can actually grow out of this stuff. So, you know, right off the bat, looking at criticism. So back to the dishwasher example. You want to say your side of the story on this one?
Sure. So, you know, when we started dating, Joree's a great cook, and I'm very appreciative of the cooking that she does. And I felt my contribution would be cleaning up after she cooked, which I was more than happy to do. Except that there was a couple things. I mean, one is I would put the dishes in the dishwasher wrong, apparently. And I had stacked dishwashers my whole life with some success. And, you know, she would often come behind me and either comment that,
gently.
Yeah, definitely gently, that, you know, this might be different, or maybe you could put this here. Or she would come around after me and reorganize the whole thing. To which, you know, it was a little bit hurtful, because it's like, look, if I'm going to put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher and you're going to come behind me and reorganize everything, why don't you just do the whole thing? Like, why are we doing double the work? It didn't make much sense to me.
And I was very careful to not want you to feel like I was criticizing the way you did that. And I have since learned more and more and more about myself. And I realized how that was coming across as a criticism. And sometimes there's, you know, challenges in the way that we do things differently. And so part of it is the awareness of how it's communicated. And part of it is outside of that moment, explaining perhaps what was coming up for each of us. Because we often talk about, if you try to explain in the moment where each of us were at, it's going to sound defensive, and it's not going to lead to more empathic, open-hearted listening, to lead to growth and connection for the next time that occurs. But it's one of those things that I think criticism can really easily show up just because people do things differently. And another example we hear a lot from clients, and we even experience this one, is the perception of criticism when it's not. And the example is, you know, one person's downstairs, the other one comes down in the morning, or maybe it's the end of the workday, and one says to the other, "Has the dog been fed?" And the implication many people receive it as is a criticism that the one who's downstairs, for example, didn't feed the dog. And it's a judgment and a criticism. That's how it gets perceived, even if that's not the intent.
Well, and I would argue, though, that "has the dog been fed" isn't a criticism in and of itself. You're saying it's a perceived criticism.
It's perceived. Okay. So, yeah, and so this is where criticism gets really tricky, because even when the question, "Has the dog been fed?" or anything along the lines of wanting to know the status of something, for many people, what they hear is, "Did you feed the dog?"
Or "You're a lousy dog owner."
And when John used to ask me, "Did the dog get fed?" my response was like, "Of course the dog got fed. What do you think? I'm not taking care of my dog?" And I thought it was a criticism. And I've heard this from clients too. And it's really hard, because there's something in where criticisms show up that get lost in translation sometimes. Because that question, "Has a dog been fed?" is a neutral question.
When it wasn't intended as a criticism, it was to make sure the dog got fed. I mean, in a household of 3 or 4 people around, I just wanted to make sure the dog got his meal, because he can't speak.
Oh, he can speak. Our
Well,
dog can
he
actually
can't
speak.
say I haven't been fed.
He won't show us. But it's an interesting
He
thing.
did tell me you're an asshole though recently. I
He
mean,
did.
talking to me.
Oh, that you were the
Yeah,
asshole.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah. That was surprising.
You weren't giving him enough of your peanut butter toast in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you say he was telling you you were an asshole and that he wasn't telling you I was the
Yeah,
asshole.
yeah, yeah.
I
No,
was
no,
confused on
no.
that. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow,
I thought,
that's a
shit,
criticism right there.
I should really clarify that really quick.
So part of the work around criticism is to check your own interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
because you could say something very clearly to me, but if it's a sensitive spot for me, or if I have a narrative attached to not being good enough or not being enough or not doing enough, I might interpret some of these neutral questions as a criticism.
Yeah, and I think that one of the great ways to deal with this is to have conversations about these sore spots after they arise, maybe a day or two or three later, and have an honest and curious and non-judgmental conversation about what's actually going on here. And, why did you get triggered? What happened here that set you off? What was your interpretation? What did you think I was saying? Because we want to iron these disconnects out, because it's over nothing.
Right. Well, and I think even the two examples we just gave of me redoing the dishwasher, that was not a verbal criticism.
Mm-mm.
And it was interpreted more of a criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should give some examples of some
Real
really,
criticisms
really
on the other
criticisms,
side.
because I think what we're talking about are these subtle ones. And well, can we finish the dishwasher thing real quick?
Sure. Joree likes it when I bring it full circle because she feels so vindicated.
I do.
And the day she felt vindicated is when I was doing the dishes and the dishwasher was pretty full, 99% full. And so we had a dinner full of dishes, and I put, as many dishes as I could in the dishwasher. And I said,
we'll have to
it's
leave
ready
some
to
in the
go.
sink.
We'll have to leave some in the sink. So she comes by a little bit later and she opens it up and she just thinks, I can fit more dishes in here.
I start rearranging.
And she started rearranging. And I was just standing there watching her, kind of curious, like, how good is she? And honestly, to my surprise, she was damn good. Like, and she sees it as a game. She sees it like Tetris, right? It's totally a puzzle game to her, and she's got good visual spatial skills. And she put, I don't know, 30% more dishes in there. I was kind of like, wow, you really are better at the dishwasher than I am. And, that made her very happy.
The only vindication I needed. And now I rarely go in after you. I think I just needed that point proved for me.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I am just really good.
I will give you that. You're better at it.
I'm really good at that.
I have no ego around it.
You don't now. You felt criticized before, though. Because that was what you example where you brought up.
It didn't make sense to me that if you're going to come back, if you're going to come in after me and redo the dishes,
right?
Like, it just seems like that's a duplication of effort,
right? So let's talk about some real criticisms.
I think anything that attacks characters, you're such an idiot. You're so lazy. You never do anything around the house. Anything where you're attacking and it's an insult, really, attacking someone's whole person is a criticism.
I think
not perceived, it's a real criticism.
Right. And I think one of the key words you said in some of those examples is an important reminder to show you when you're doing this are words like always, never, those all or nothing statements. They're just not true.
It's never true.
It's never true. And so we need to be really mindful. And this is something that I work really hard at for myself. And I try to teach my clients and our clients just the power of language. That it seems so overly simplified, but what we say matters. Mm-hmm. How we say it matters. I always say there's 4 things that need to be in alignment for language to be, or communication to be received in the intention that it was given. So it's not just the words, but the tone, the body language, and the volume all have to be in alignment. So, you could have the right words, but a tone that sounds critical, it's going to throw it entirely off.
And the tone might be actual or perceived.
Correct.
And we've seen that before too. So, because some people have a tone to their voice and have no awareness, and that's just their regular everyday voice. Some people we know have an outdoor voice as an indoor voice,
right?
As far as volume goes.
I'm curious. Do you have real examples of when I've actually criticized you, not perceived, like with redoing the dishwasher, Have I ever really criticized you?
I don't think you don't criticize.
I don't criticize.
No.
I don't think that's one that I personally connect around. I
Yeah.
don't think I'm a critical person.
I think there may have been times when we were playing around with anger and getting angry with each other after the breakup, where once or twice there might have been something in there, but that was just more of an insult, not a criticism.
True.
And that went both ways.
Right.
That wasn't
Right.
just you.
Yeah, I don't think criticism has been much a part of our relationship dynamics at all. I think we're both too highly sensitive.
Well, and I've always been aware of it, and so I've always tried not to do it.
Right. And I think it's worth saying again, and I know I say it often, but in order to build the most secure relationship possible, a really great starting point is to know your partner's deepest wounds and insecurities. And what are their sore spots? Where do they get sensitive? And do your very best not to activate them.
Yeah, the goal is to create a safe and secure relationship for both of you. That's the goal.
And so how we communicate to each other, even when angry, is gonna help with that.
Yeah. So are you ready to turn to defensiveness?
Yeah. I want to talk about how I was defensive around not being defensive.
Okay.
I think I had some self-righteousness that I am not a defensive person. And I am humbly saying now, shit, God damn it, I am. And that's really hard. I was defensive the other day to you, and I hated myself for how it felt. Not hate is really strong. I felt shame afterwards around not being a better open-hearted listener, because I was quick to share my actions or my what's another word for the actions of what I was defending, my intentions. Mm-hmm. And I was not wrong in what I was saying. Mm-hmm. However, the timing at which I named it was not appropriate to what you were sharing.
Well, that's an interesting point too. You weren't wrong, because those were your intentions and your actions were defensible, but it's not about that.
But it wasn't about, no, it was about, am I here to openly listen, openly hear what you're saying? And can I listen to you in a way that has nothing to do with what was underneath it for me?
I think this is a really, really critical point. If you're reading the transcript, get out your highlighter. If you're taking notes, get out your pen and paper. But I totally lost it. Well, that's a cliffhanger, huh?
Seriously?
Defensiveness.
I wasn't wrong in my intentions.
Yeah. Oh, so it's about hearing your partner's emotion beneath their words and validating how they feel. That's the first step always. I have not seen a situation where that's not a good first step. Mm-hmm. Hey, honey, I see where you're really upset about that. Wow, I can see where that really hurt. I get that you were let down. I get that you're disappointed. I feel you.
Are you available to be vulnerable right now, and we can share what it was?
Again, sure.
Okay. So you want to set the stage?
You'll have to refresh my memory.
Okay. So it was a Wednesday morning, about 7 a.m. And that's actually true. See, this is where sometimes my good memory comes into a hard. Oy vey. Oh, I love when my German fiance uses Yiddish. Okay, so literally it was like a Wednesday morning, and it was really early. It's like 7 a.m. and you were kind of in a grouchy mood. And I had come downstairs to say good morning, and I was met to a slightly cold reception. And I went back upstairs and I was finishing my morning routine before we went to the gym. Okay, now we've got the stage set. You're going through your vitamin drawer, getting your vitamins of the morning. And I asked what was going on, because I could tell you weren't in a great mood. And that's always an interesting question for me, because I used to always really, really, really want to know what was going on. And I've gotten better at not being so needy to be nosy, because it's not nosy, but I used to feel like I had to know, mostly because underneath that, I was afraid it was about me. Mm-hmm. And so I used to pry a lot more about what you were feeling, thinking, or where you were at emotionally, because I did not feel secure in our attachment back then. And I had fears that it was about me. So I used to inquire more. Mm-hmm. Anyhow. And you shared, you were kind of grumpy. Mm-hmm. So do you want to share what you shared with me?
I don't remember.
Oh, so
I'm remembering as you're sharing.
Okay. So John moved in here into my house about 5 months ago. And the room that is his office was previously like a TV room, playroom for the kids. And there's a big couch in there, and there's still furniture in there that we need to remove. And his desk is a small little tiny desk my daughter used during COVID. So there's not much space for his stuff. And I think because of his eye issues he's had, I mean, he moved in September, lost his vision end of November. So we were going on 4 months.
And been blind for 4 months since in one eye.
We've been going on 4 months of being halted in progressing, making our home, given to the eye issues. But something about there was mounting frustration, maybe some resentment around not having your space in the office as you needed.
I think I woke up that morning thinking that I was frustrated because I feel like the progress in my office has been halted, not through your fault or mine, but through circumstance. I think that I felt like I was a little bit less than because I had no space in the house to call my own. Again, not your fault, just because of circumstance. And I was a little bit grieving or sad over having just given up all my stuff, pretty much, or a lot of my stuff, in order to move in. And partly that was just fueled by the fact that I woke up in a bad mood. I was just I hadn't slept great, and I was just a little bit grouchy, and my mind kind of ran away with me.
And so when he shared this with me, I did not respond well. I went immediately to defensiveness. And I think underneath my defensiveness, I was feeling sad that you were sad and frustrated. And I could have just stopped there and said that. And that would have honored and met you where you were at. It would have validated your emotion and your experience and your mood. And that validation could have been a simple sentence and then a hug and a kiss, and that could have been it. But I got defensive because what I interpreted was, you have not made space for me in this house. You have not welcomed me into your home. I feel like less than. I mean, I think I felt that. So I immediately went into, but look at all that I've done and looked at all that I do.
Which is true also.
Which is also true. And that wasn't at all what he was saying. He didn't come to me and say, hey, Joree, I'm upset that you haven't done enough to make me feel welcome in your home. He was saying, I don't have an office to call my own because we haven't been able to move things out yet.
And it was just a feeling. And a lot of times there's nothing you can do about those feelings other than to hear them and validate them.
But because of me being defensive about it, we now were disconnected for a few hours. And I mean, it didn't last long. It was, we went to the gym and we drove home. And then I think by the time we got back from the gym, we talked through it and it was better. But what made it better was really my realization of, oh, wow, shit, I really did not handle that well. And I'm really sorry. I think I felt so sad that in my mind, I could have done more to give you that space. And I interpret it as I wasn't doing enough. But that's an old narrative for me. If I'm not enough.
And it was really easy to forgive you too for that. Like, it wasn't a big deal at all because you have done so much.
Right.
And you have been so giving. It's just in that moment, I was struggling a little bit.
Right.
And that wasn't really about you.
And so to be less defensive is to lead with validation. Wow, love, yeah. If I was in that situation, that'd be really hard for me.
And I got to say, for those listening, like, this is a skill that I did not know for, 55 years of my life. I've only really started practicing it and getting better at it over the past 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And it's a game changer. In fact, I think it's one of the most powerful skills we can learn if you want a healthy, thriving relationship.
Yeah.
Is non-defensive listening. It's one of the ways we heal each other. It's one of the ways that we can hear each other's emotions and not get triggered by them and make our partner feel safe and secure, that's the goal.
And I can say what was going on for me in that moment is I started getting flooded and I was uncomfortable and I was operating from an old narrative of I'm not enough. If only I were more, you wouldn't be feeling this way. And that's my work. And so the best way to practice non-defensive listening is you got to practice it outside of those moments and learn how to self-soothe. Because had I just paused and taken a few deep breaths, I could have come back to validating your emotions a lot faster without any of my role in that moment. We can always come back later if there's more to be said.
Well, and that's why I think going back and revisiting these disconnections a day, 2, 3 days later is so critical, because then you can go through, okay, so, well, gee, I was defensive. I apologize for being defensive in my response. Let me see if I can come up with a non-defensive response and practice that with you now, so that next time I've got a better shot at practicing non-defensive listening. And I think that's the way that we begin to learn and practice and assimilate these new skills, because no one was ever taught this stuff.
No,
it's foreign to all of us. It's a new way of communicating, and it's incredibly important.
Well, and being defensive is a self-protective mechanism, but it's not protecting the relationship. Right? I'm defending against my own actions. I'm protecting myself here. But I was not in a space to protect you in that moment. And I have to say, Lev, you've gotten so good at non-defensive listening that part of my shame in that moment was, God damn it, he's better at this than I am.
Well, that makes one thing.
Well, we've both grown immensely over the years. And that's me complimenting you that you've gotten very, very good. And we'll talk about it in the next episode, which is one of the things that I am so proud of John, is he would go from defensive pretty quick to stonewalling.
And which makes conversation really hard.
And you don't do either of those anymore. And if you do, it's on a much, much smaller scale and doesn't lead to the same disconnection. And, look, no one's going to be perfect here. Right. And look, that Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. was partly mood dependent. Right. Had you gotten a really good night's sleep, that annoyance might have, been smaller on that 10-point scale, but the mood or lack of sleep contributed to the annoyance, which moved it up that scale.
Yeah. And I would also say that that's not a typical response for you.
And I think it hit something really core in me. Right. I think I've worked so hard at trying to make what was my house ours. And I've tried so hard to be giving and let go of any sort of, what's the word I can't think of, just this house was the only thing that was ever mine. And it was a big deal for us to live together. And that was me giving up what was mine and making it ours. And that took me a few years to be able to be ready to do.
Well, you've been amazing in that process.
Thank you. Which is why I felt so, I took your comment as hurt that I wasn't doing what I had intended. And that's the thing. I could do it perfectly intended and your feelings could still be hurt. Both are true. And one has nothing to do with the other, because we still need your office to be all yours.
Yeah. And so realize also, to the listener, a lot of this is about our perception of what our partner is saying and the story that comes up in our head as a result of what we think they're saying. And they're not always saying what we think they're saying.
So, one of the ways to interrupt criticism or defensiveness could be through curiosity. Hey, Lev, I saw you just redid the dishwasher. I took that as I didn't do good enough. Is that what you really meant there? And ask a question. Interrupt it. To not be defensive. If John said to me, hey, I'm not feeling like I have my space, I could have said, hey, is that something that I have not done that I could have done differently that I could change from now going forward? Or is that really just about needing the office fix? I could clarify, because my perception took it to much bigger.
Well, and so let me ask you this. Why should people practice this and get beyond these two horsemen that we're talking about? What's the payoff?
Safety and security in the relationship, secure attachment, freedom to express yourself more easily. If I fear that what I say is going to be reacted to with defensiveness, or if I share something and I'm told some critical response in return, I'm not going to speak up very much at all.
Yeah. And I would add that it's partly about creating an environment where more positive emotions can come to light more frequently, more easily.
Right.
More intensely, where the depth of connection is beyond what you've ever seen or experienced in your life. And there's a place for things like relaxation and laughter and silliness and teasing that doesn't hurt. There's a place for things like awe and wonder and curiosity and love and joy and passion. And to me, that's partly what I want to convey to the listener is that's where we're trying to get, and why we're trying to get there is to create a relationship that's most likely unlike anything you've ever dreamt of.
It's possible. And we've done the work over the years to get there. And while we were always in love, our relationship did not have all those qualities. Mm-hmm. Those are things that we've consciously worked to heal and consciously worked to create. And because of that safety and security, we can tease each other that might alleviate some of the emotions that would have led to criticism or defensiveness. Mm-hmm. And because we're so safe, we can say things in a playful way that don't get interpreted as criticism. Because when we're in a connected and safe place, and there's safety and security in expressing ourselves without defensiveness or interpretation of criticism, I can say, now my tone will matter here, but I can say, you're being a real butthead today.
Yeah.
And he could be like, yep, I really am. Yep, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah, I like being a butthead.
And sometimes I can alleviate some of my frustration by naming, some slight annoyance. But if it's playful and it's received as playful, it can also get the message across.
Yeah, you can't make a statement like that with any sort of anger, just for those of you trying this out.
You can't really do it if you don't have the foundation of security and playfulness, because playfulness necessitates security.
Yeah, and I think that part of the goal is to get to this space where you've got more positive emotion in the relationship than negative emotion, which means that your partner and yourself are interpreting one another's actions with grace and forgiveness and kindness and positivity, as opposed to what we see all too often, which is looking at the partner's actions through a very negative, well, somewhat or very negative lens. Mm-hmm. And so when you look for the worst, you will find it, because it is there, whether real or imagined. And the lens through which you view your partner becomes one of the critical pieces if you want to build a happy, thriving relationship.
Yeah. So stay tuned for our next episode. We are going to cover the next two of contempt and stonewalling as the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And I just want to finish off by saying one thing. You just mentioned that we need to turn up the volume on those positive emotions. And bringing it back to the Gottmans, they used to have a ratio of what we were working towards.
5 to 1. 5 times
1.
As much positive emotions, compliments, kind words, as negative comments, put downs, or criticisms.
And in their most recent book, which came out last year called Fight Right, they actually changed that ratio. 20 to 1. So think about your own interactions with your partner. Play a little game in your own head. Go throughout the day and just see if you can categorize your interactions and which bucket they would fall into, positive or negative. 20 to 1 is crazy. Mm-hmm. And we've done other podcast episodes. And I don't know if we've done it on Love Isn't Enough. I know we've done them for sure on our joint shared episodes, but we'll do more about how to build a culture of gratitude, culture of gratitude and appreciation. But it's really easy to actually build up more of those positives when you're aware of it. But they say the ratio is 20 to 1 normally and 5 to 1 positive to negative during conflict.
Yeah. And I'm still
trying to wrap my head around that one, because that feels really hard. And look for the patterns that you see in your partner. The invitation here is to be curious. Be curious within yourself, be curious within the patterns. And here's another key. When you see the patterns, name it as a negative pattern versus over personalizing it, because now we are going to look at our own self critically, at our partner with more criticism. If you can name it as a negative pattern.
Give us an example of that.
So when you get stuck into a cycle of negativity, and maybe you're stuck in defensiveness or criticism, and you're going down the path of what feels like a familiar pathway of how you communicate, that's a negative pattern, right? That's what you said in the beginning, the details versus the pattern. The pattern is where we get stuck. The details are going to be about the dog being fed, the dishwasher, the bills, the kids, whatever. If you can name it of, wow, look at that, we're stuck in that negative pattern again. Even just naming that can help interrupt being in the negative pattern.
Yeah, I think Julie Manano refers to it as the negative cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's from the book Secure Love, which is phenomenal if you haven't heard of that one yet. But naming it outside of each other as this like third entity of, oh, there's that pattern, helps you to bring some more, ideally, curiosity to it, compassion for yourself of, oh man, we're in it again.
I think it's also a reminder that we're in it together. It's us against the pattern,
Right.
not me against you.
And that's the negative, you know, feedback loop we get stuck in, is it's, we're not on the same team here. And if I'm going to say what you did wrong and I'm going to defend my actions, you're going to tell me what I did wrong and you defend your actions. Well, now we're on opposite sides.
Yeah.
It's ideally us against this pattern.
As it
So
should be.
thank you guys for tuning in. It's always fun to get uncomfortable and be vulnerable about our own shit. So hope you enjoyed our storytelling of where we still get stuck, because yes, we're human. And if this episode resonated, we'd love for you to give it a rating, a review, to share it. And if it's exciting you to want to learn more, but you don't know how, check out the link in our show notes for our masterclass series. You can sign up for the whole year and get a bonus coaching session with us, or you can sign up for each individual class on its own and pick a topic that is of most interest to you. But these tools is not simply knowing better is doing better. You got to understand where we're getting stuck on a deeper level, because there's layers of stories attached and old wounds that are being activated. That is really helpful when you're guided to more curiosity, more compassion, more awareness. And that's what we're here to do.
Thanks so much for your time and attention. As always, we appreciate it. Until next time, this is Dr. John and Joree.